Now I'm going to teach you guys how to animate puppets. So the first thing we need to do is I need to prepare this file for puppet animation. Now this is the kind of thing that I don't expect you to do. These are the kinds of things that already will be done when I hand you a shot to animate for Double Rainboom. But you can still follow along. It's really good stuff to learn. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of the rough animation. I'm going to right click it and hit cut frames. I'm going to put all of it inside of its own symbol. I want the entire thing inside of a symbol. I don't want them on separate layers. I just want them in a symbol. And I would call that symbol rough animation. And I double click, delete, paste frames. There. Now I've got all the rough animation inside of a symbol called rough animation. So if I go back out, I can delete these layers, and now I've just got a layer here called rough animation, and it is the rough animation. See how it's just a symbol? And I go over here, and it's still a symbol. It's all inside of a symbol, which is great. That's the kind of thing that we would do for you. When you get a shot handed out to you, the rough animation, which is our animatic, will be inside of its own symbol. It'll be on its own layer. It'll all be right here, and it'll look great. That way you know exactly what kind of timing you have. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the assets, and I'm going to call this Rainbow Dash Puppets, and there'll be another layer, also set to guide, that would be called Pinkie Pie Puppets. And then I would put those puppets in there for you. So this would be Puppets folder. I would go over to Rainbow Dash. I would click on Rainbow Dash and open up her puppet folder, and I just make sure that I copy 1, 2, 3. These 3 symbols down here. Copy. Don't need any of that other crap. Just those 3 symbols. And making sure that I'm on the Rainbow Dash Puppets layer. Paste. And of course making sure that's not unlocked. Alright, paste. There we go. So I've put them in the file. And I want this assets folder to be above the frame edge. See how the frame edge is below it? That way I can select these assets and I can put them all the way up here. Like that. And then they have an alpha on them, so I'll turn the alpha off. There. Now I've got the Rainbow Dash puppets, and the cool thing about that is that these puppets are 100% rigged. So if I open up my library, oh, check it out. I've already got all the folders of all the parts here. Just by copying those 3 symbols, I put every single symbol that makes up Rainbow Dash inside of this file. I'm going to do the same thing with Pinkie Pie. I've got a Pinkie Pie folder over here. Pinkie Pie. Let's open up the Pinkie Pie puppet. And, yep, I've already got them selected. Copy. Come back over to Anim Test. Paste. There we go. Okay. And I would put it right above there. So this is what you would see. Bam. And, of course, it needs to cut. There. Okay. And the other thing that I would do is I would put any kind of director's notes down here that applied to the shot. So let's say, for example, you're animating Rainbow Dash flying really fast, and she has a rainbow trail behind her. I would probably put in the notes, hey, character animator person, don't animate the rainbow trail because that's for our special effects crew to handle. Just focus on Rainbow Dash flying. Or I might put in a note saying, hey, look, the animatic has Rainbow Dash smiling in this. She actually needs to be frowning, so make her frown. So any changes from the animatic I would put down here in director's notes. I would also put down how many frames the whole animation should be. So for example, if the rough animation, like this one for example, comes out to 48 frames, I would put down, this shot is 48 frames long, no more, no less! Or I would say, it's 48 frames long, and you can go over or below it. You know, it's okay. We have room to change the length of the frames. So if you're animating Rainbow Dash here, for example, looking up, and you realize, oh man, I would love it if I could have 24 extra frames to kind of sell that whole look of anger, then yeah, go ahead, put 48 frames on there. If the director's notes say you can do that, then you can do that. And that's what the director's notes would be down there for. So what we've got right here is exactly what a shot for Double Rainboom would look like. You'd have the puppets that you need up there. You'd have any other assets that you would need up there to animate. Let's say a pony is messing with a vial, which we have in the film. I would put that vial up here for you, so you would animate the vial as well, because that's a direct prop. If it's a direct prop, then the character animator has to animate it. But this is what you'd have. So everything that I do from this point on is stuff that I would expect you to do by yourselves. I would hand you a shot. It would look exactly like this. This point forward, everything's being done by you. And now let's walk through this step by step. I want to animate Rainbow Dash first, because animating 2 ponies at once is freaking insane. So I need to find one of these puppets that is most similar to my first pose. And it looks like it's going to be the profile view. Yeah, definitely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unlock the Rainbow Dash Puppets layer. Well, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Control-Shift-S and save, which I should have been doing a lot of. Notice that every time I save, I always do a Control-Shift-S, and I always just change the little number at the end. Every single time. I never save over a document that I'm working in. I always save it as a new document. It has saved my ass so many times when Flash corrupts, which it has a tendency to do. Okay, so I'm going to take Rainbow Dash here and go Control-Copy. And I'm going to create a brand new layer above Rough Animation. I'm going to call this Rainbow Dash Animation, RD Anim. I'm going to paste. Wait for it to paste. There we go. Alright, and then I'm going to make it the right size. As soon as my Flash unfreezes on me. There. Okay. I'm going to use the feet as a guide. I can hold down Alt and Shift to keep the feet there. Looks like that's about right. So that's the size I need. That's about as close as I can possibly get. Alright. And now what I'm going to do is my X sheet up here. I'm going to mess with this X sheet a little. Well, I know that the animation starts right here, and I know that it cuts right there, right? So I'm going to click on the X sheet layer. I'm going to right click and go copy frames. Now I'm going to double click and go inside of the Rainbow Dash puppet, and bam! Oh my god, look at all these layers. Oh god. Well, you know what I'm going to do? Before I do anything, I'm just going to create a brand new layer. I'm going to right-click the blank empty frame and hit Paste Frames. Bam! It pastes my X sheet in here. Hey, look! My X sheet tells me exactly where I'm supposed to cut. So I'm just going to make every single layer in here the same length. F5. There. Everything is at cut. And you know what? I'm going to go ahead and copy this cut down there too so I know exactly where it is. There we go. Okay, looks like there's some problems with the puppet, which I have yet to fix. It's on my stuff to-do list. It looks like if I select the tail... Oh, it's set to loop. Okay, that's bad. Let me select the entire tail and make it single frame like it should be. And that stops that. Looks like she has a Twilight Sparkle belly. And that's set to loop as well. Let's set that to single frame. There we go. Okay, it's gone. Alright, so if I scrub the timeline, everything's good. Alright. So now I've got a timeline inside of the Rainbow Dash puppet, which is good, and they match the number of frames that are outside the puppet, which we want. We want the same number of frames, because if I hit play out here, I want it to play everything inside of that puppet, and if everything inside of the puppet is set to a different number of frames, then everything's going to go out of sync, and it's going to be really weird. So it's my X sheet that keeps track of that. Double click. Everything matches. Okay, I already know that inside of the head there are more layers, so I'm going to double click. Alright, we have more layers inside of the head. 2 of them are empty. Let's just delete them. We don't need them. And I'll create a new layer. I'll right click and I'll hit Paste Frames. And I'll do the same thing again. F5. Cut. Oh god. And there. Scrub the timeline. Nothing's wrong. Okay. And since I built these puppets, I also know that inside of the eye, there's another set of layers. So, new layer, right-click, paste frames. It's very important that every single symbol that you plan on animating inside of has the same number of frames on it, period. You never want a symbol that has less or more frames if you plan on animating inside of it. Okay, I'm scrubbing the timeline, nothing's wrong. Okay, so I'm going to go all the way back out to scene 1. Now I've got my Rainbow Dash, right? Now I'm ready to start animating. So I'm going to double click to go inside of the Rainbow Dash layer. And oh, look at this! If I scrub the timeline, I can no longer see my rough animation. Well, that's freaking annoying. There's two ways to get around that. One way is to double-click back out, scrub the timeline until you get to a new pose. Looks like that's the first new pose right there. And then double-click back in and see how it keeps that pose there. And then I could pose everything in here to match. Double-click back out, go to a new pose, double-click in, pose it to match, yada, yada, yada. It's a lot of double-clicking in and double-clicking out and double-clicking in and double-clicking out. That's one way of doing it. There's an easier way, though. We had symbolized this rough animation. If I go to the library, there should be... Yeah, look, there's a symbol in there called rough animation. Why don't I just, inside of the puppet, create a new layer, call this layer rough animation, and just drag this rough animation symbol over here. Bam. Oh god, it's really big. We need to make it smaller. And here's something really cool. Notice how when I move everything in here, it's moving it over there as well. Because these are both the same symbol. Just because I copied and pasted it doesn't mean that it's not the same symbol. If I change things in this symbol, it's going to change it over there because they're both the same symbol. Alright, so I just want this rough animation to match the one out here. So let's use that as a guide. Use my arrow keys, get it up. Looks like it needs to be a little bigger. It doesn't need to be perfect, it's just a rough. You know, I always say that every single time I say it doesn't need to be perfect, and yet I still make it perfect. I just can't help it. Okay, that's good enough. Alright. So there. Now if I scrub the timeline in here, I've got my rough animation. Sweet! That means I never have to leave this symbol. I could stay in this symbol for the entire time. Freaking awesome. Okay, but I'm still kind of annoyed at the other rough back there, so I'm going to jump back out. I'm going to come down to this rough anim. I'm going to turn it off. No, the rough anim. There we go. I'm going to turn that off. That way I don't see it. And that way all I see is this symbol. Double click inside. I can start animating.